What is real? It's a question that sounds simple, yet no answer lasts longer than the thought that asks it. Every age, every civilization has built its truth on shifting ground, and every truth eventually dissolves into mystery. For more than 2,000 years, one philosopher's voice has echoed through that mystery louder than almost any other: Plato. Long before science, before machines or mathematics as we know them, he imagined that reality itself might be an illusion. That what we see, touch, and live is not the ultimate truth, but a shadow of something deeper, something perfect, geometric, and eternal. In his most famous story, Plato described a cave. Inside it, a group of prisoners have been chained since birth. They can't turn their heads, they can only stare at the wall in front of them. Behind them burns a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners, figures walk carrying objects that cast moving shadows on the wall. For the prisoners, those shadows are reality. They have never seen the fire, never seen the world beyond the cave. To them, the shadows are all that exist. But one day, a prisoner is freed. When he turns, he sees the fire, and eventually, he steps outside the cave into the blinding light of the sun. For the first time, he sees real objects, real colors, the source of truth itself. And when he returns to tell the others, they mock him, unable to believe what they cannot see. For Plato, the cave was not a story about ignorance, it was about existence. The shadows are our world of appearances, everything that seems solid but isn't. The light of the sun is the world of perfect forms, invisible patterns that exist beyond space and time. Every object, every idea, every feeling in this world is a reflection of a perfect version elsewhere. A tree is only a shadow of the perfect form of tree. Justice is a shadow of perfect justice. Beauty is a reflection of the perfect, unchanging idea of beauty. To Plato, the true world was not made of matter, it was made of mathematics. He imagined that the cosmos was built by a divine craftsman, the demiurge, who shaped the universe not from nothing, but from geometry. Numbers, ratios, and forms were the raw material of existence. The stars, he wrote, were the visible gods, moving according to harmonic laws. The human soul itself, he said, was built from proportion and harmony, the same ratios that govern music and motion. To him, reality was not chaos, it was architecture. The Greeks who followed Plato called this structure the cosmos, a word that meant not just world, but order. The universe was a living, breathing design, held together by logic. Everything imperfect in nature, every shadow, pointed back to a hidden pattern. And to see that pattern was to glimpse the mind of the Creator. Plato's vision was radical because it made reason sacred. The divine wasn't in temples or myths, it was in mathematics. Understanding reality became an act of worship. For centuries after his death, this idea spread through the ancient world. Philosophers in Alexandria, scholars in the Islamic Golden Age, and Christian theologians in medieval Europe all inherited Plato's idea that truth was mathematical, eternal, and beyond the senses. When Galileo looked through his telescope nearly 2,000 years later, he wrote that, "The universe is written in the language of mathematics." He might as well have been quoting Plato. Newton too believed he was uncovering the divine geometry of creation. The laws of motion, gravity, light, all of them were expressions of an order hidden beneath the surface of things. Even Einstein, centuries later, described his own search for the mind of God in mathematical form. Without knowing it, modern science had become the continuation of Plato's dream. But Plato's cave is more than a metaphor about knowledge. It's a question about perception, and about whether the world we see is fundamentally real or just a projection. Every technology we invent to study reality seems to bring us closer to that question. Telescopes show us invisible galaxies. Microscopes reveal hidden worlds inside a drop of water. Physics shows us that what feels solid is mostly empty space. The closer we look, the less real everything appears. Plato would have understood that paradox. He believed the senses deceive us. What we see is never the truth, only its echo. What's real, he said, cannot be seen with eyes or touched with hands. It can only be known by reason. He saw the philosopher not as a dreamer, but as someone trying to wake up, to step out of the cave. In his dialogue, Timaeus, Plato described how the universe came into being. It wasn't created randomly, nor by chance. The demiurge, the cosmic craftsman, used eternal mathematical forms to impose order on chaos. He shaped the world according to perfect geometric solids, the tetrahedron for fire, the cube for earth, the octahedron for air, the icosahedron for water, and the dodecahedron for the heavens. These shapes were not symbols. They were the literal building blocks of existence. The structure of matter itself, he believed, was mathematical perfection written into form. For millennia, this was only philosophy, beautiful, abstract, unreachable. But over time, as science evolved, something strange happened. The physical world began to behave exactly as Plato imagined. When physicists discovered the laws of motion, the geometry of gravity, the ratios of orbiting planets, they found that the universe didn't behave like chaos. It behaved like code. Every law could be written as an equation, every event predicted with precision. The deeper they looked, the more it seemed that reality was not random but programmed. Even the smallest particles, electrons, quarks, photons, moved in patterns defined by mathematics. The universe wasn't made of matter anymore. It was made of information. In a way, Plato's cave had become our laboratory. We too were watching shadows, only now the shadows were data, equations, simulations. The fire behind us was no longer mythic, but technological. Every discovery brought us closer to the same realization Plato reached with pure thought, that maybe what we call real is only an interface, a projection of something deeper, something we can sense but not yet touch. When Plato looked at the world, he saw design, not in the human sense of artifice, but as an underlying architecture, a universal logic that binds everything. To him, mathematics wasn't invention, it was discovery. Numbers existed before humans. We didn't create geometry, we found it. And if geometry exists beyond us, then perhaps so does the structure of existence itself. It's a haunting idea, one that would sleep in philosophy for centuries before physics would awaken it again. Because thousands of years after Plato, when computers appeared, a new language was born, one that could finally describe the world the way he imagined it. Binary code, zeros and ones. The digital mirror of the demiurge's geometry. We built machines that think, systems that simulate reality down to the atom. And suddenly, the question that began in a cave returned. How do we know this is real? Plato warned that most people, chained to the wall, mistake the shadows for truth. They live in a simulation of understanding, never realizing that what they see is a reflection of something else. And now, 2,400 years later, with computers, virtual worlds, and digital consciousness, humanity stands once again before the cave wall, staring at new shadows, brighter and sharper than ever. In the next part, the question shifts from philosophy to physics, from Plato's geometry to the modern code of the universe, where scientists, not poets, now whisper the same thought. That reality might not be continuous matter at all, but computation. The universe runs on rules, laws so precise they can predict eclipses centuries in advance or describe the curve of a galaxy billions of light years away. But the more we uncover those rules, the more we realize they aren't just laws, they're logic. Mathematics doesn't just describe reality, it is reality. And that realization has led modern physics right back to where Plato began. When Isaac Newton looked at the falling apple and the moon above, he saw not chaos, but symmetry. He found that gravity obeyed a simple equation, the same formula that governed both the heavens and the earth. It was as if nature spoke one language, written in numbers. Newton gave us the first glimpse of a universe that behaved like a perfectly balanced machine. Then Einstein came along and shattered it, only to rebuild it again in an even deeper order. Space and time, he said, were not separate things, but woven together into a single fabric. Matter bent that fabric, and the fabric told matter how to move. Behind everything, the speed of light, the curvature of space-time, the laws of energy, there was always math. Always structure, always code. If Newton was the architect of motion and Einstein the architect of space and time, quantum mechanics revealed something stranger. Reality, at its smallest scale, behaves like information. Subatomic particles don't move in predictable paths. They exist as probabilities, waves of potential that collapse into definite states only when observed. Observation doesn't just record reality, it creates it. At first, this was an accident of mathematics. Then it became impossible to ignore. The double-slit experiment showed that a single electron could behave like a wave or a particle depending on whether it was being watched. That simple act of measurement changed reality's outcome. The boundary between observer and observed, between mind and matter, began to blur. In 1989, the physicist John Archibald Wheeler proposed something radical. He called it "it from bit." Everything he said, matter, energy, space, time, comes not from particles or fields, but from information. The universe, at its core, isn't built from stuff. It's built from bits, the same binary building blocks that drive computers. Reality itself, Wheeler suggested, could be a vast computation. At the time, it sounded poetic, even absurd. But as technology advanced, as computers began simulating physics and consciousness, his words began to look prophetic. Scientists realized that every law of nature could be expressed as an algorithm. Every atom obeyed code. Every force was math written in motion. Even the structure of the universe seemed digital. Quantum theory describes the world in discrete packets, quanta, not continuous flows. Energy, charge, light, even space itself come in measurable units, like pixels on a screen. Zoom in far enough, and the smooth image of reality breaks into dots, the smallest possible pieces of existence. In digital physics, the universe isn't a movie, it's a rendering. A simulation updated frame by frame, governed by underlying logic. If that's true, then Plato's idea of a mathematical reality wasn't metaphor, it was prophecy. In the early 2000s, philosopher Nick Bostrom took this to its logical conclusion. In his now famous simulation argument, he proposed that if civilizations can eventually create simulations indistinguishable from reality, and if many such simulations exist, then statistically, it's more likely that we are living in one of them, not the original world, but a replica. In other words, we may already be characters inside the code. The idea divided science. Some dismissed it as philosophy. Others began to look for evidence. Physicists have since discovered curious signs that our universe behaves like a programmed system. Space itself appears pixelated at the Planck scale, the smallest possible distance beyond which nothing can be divided. Energy and time tick forward in quantized steps, not smooth flow. Some researchers even found that cosmic rays, particles traveling from deep space, arrive only in specific energy levels, as if reality has a resolution limit, like a computer screen. Then there are the symmetries, mathematical coincidences so precise they seem intentional. The equations governing electromagnetism, gravity, and quantum mechanics interlock like gears in an invisible machine. The constants of the universe, the strength of gravity, the speed of light, the charge of the electron, are tuned so perfectly that if even one was slightly different, atoms couldn't form, stars wouldn't burn, and life would never exist. To some, this fine-tuning suggests divine design. To others, it suggests simulation, parameters set by an architect who adjusted the code until reality could sustain itself. What's more, the way information behaves in our universe resembles the way data behaves in computation. Black holes, once thought to be pure void, now appear to store every piece of information that falls into them. Quantum entanglement, where two particles mirror each other's states instantaneously across any distance, behaves like a shared data link, not a physical signal. Even the laws of thermodynamics, which govern how energy and order behave, describe the flow of information as much as the flow of heat. All of this raises a haunting possibility. Maybe the universe is not like a computer, maybe it is one. But if that's true, then who or what built it? Some scientists say it doesn't matter. A simulation that's perfect in every way is reality. Others point out that even in our own technology, we are becoming creators of simulated worlds. Video games, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence are already building environments where conscious beings, or their early imitations, interact inside digital frameworks. If we can create simulated universes, what stops a higher order of intelligence from having done the same? The line between physics and philosophy blurs again. Because if existence is code, then the universe is not random, it's written. Every law, every atom, every thought follows a syntax. The Big Bang wasn't an explosion, it was execution, the moment the program began to run. Even time might not be continuous. Quantum experiments show that events don't flow smoothly but occur in discrete jumps, like frames in animation. Between each frame, reality recalculates. It's as if the cosmos refreshes itself billions of times per second. That rhythm, the cosmic clock, could be the processing speed of existence. For Plato, the source of all creation was the realm of perfect forms. For digital physics, it's the source code. The form of a triangle becomes an equation. The form of justice becomes a pattern of logic. The same idea, abstract perfection shaping the material world, has returned, wearing the language of computers instead of myth. And yet, beneath all the science, the same question remains. What are we? Are we conscious matter, or matter made conscious by design? Are we living beings or self-aware programs executing a role inside a system too vast to perceive? To Plato, the soul was eternal, a fragment of the cosmic mind. To physicists, consciousness is the one phenomenon they still can't quantify. No equation explains why experience feels like something, why awareness exists at all. In a simulated universe, consciousness would be the final frontier, the code that reads itself. And that's where the mystery deepens. Because if the universe is a simulation, then the architect must exist outside it. But what if consciousness itself, the observer, is the architect? What if the act of awareness, the same act that collapses quantum probabilities into reality, is the very mechanism by which the code runs? In that sense, we wouldn't be prisoners inside a simulation. We would be participants in its creation, fragments of the same intelligence that wrote the rules. The more science discovers, the more Plato's cave begins to look like a mirror. The shadows on the wall are not illusions, they're projections of something real, patterns of data, geometry, and light. And when we turn toward the source, we find not a god or a computer, but the mind itself, staring back. In the next part, the story comes full circle. Plato's demiurge meets the modern architect. Consciousness meets code. And the question becomes not if the universe is a simulation, but why. If reality is written in code, then who, or what, is the author? That question has haunted both philosophers and physicists since the beginning. For Plato, the answer was the demiurge, the divine craftsman who shaped the cosmos not out of nothing, but out of eternal logic. For modern science, the answer is less poetic, but perhaps even more mysterious. Consciousness. Because no matter how deep we go, from atoms to quarks to strings, we still can't find the moment when matter becomes mind. The universe behaves like an equation until someone observes it, and then it behaves like a story. The laws of physics tell us what should happen, but observation decides what does happen. The act of watching seems to change the world. In quantum theory, this is called the observer effect. When a particle is not being observed, it exists as a cloud of possibilities. It could be anywhere, doing anything. But when it's measured, it chooses one state. Reality snaps into place. It's as if the universe is waiting for consciousness to notice it before becoming real. Plato would have smiled at that. He believed that the soul is not in the universe. The universe is in the soul. He called it the world soul, the living intelligence that animates everything. The demiurge, he said, built the cosmos as a reflection of this soul, a perfect design that the human mind could rediscover through reason and contemplation. What if that's what modern physics has been circling all along, that consciousness is not a product of matter, but its architect? To see how close the ideas have come, look at the thinkers standing on both sides of this bridge. On one side, ancient Greece, Plato, Pythagoras, and the mystics of Alexandria, claiming that reality is number and harmony, that the visible world is an echo of pure geometry. On the other, quantum physicists like Max Planck and Erwin Schrödinger saying that consciousness is fundamental, that matter itself is derivative of mind. Schrödinger once wrote, "The total number of minds in the universe is one." He didn't mean it poetically. He meant that what we call individual consciousness might just be localized expressions of a single, universal awareness, like waves on the same ocean. If that's true, then the universe isn't a simulation built by an external creator. It's a simulation that consciousness is running within itself. The architect isn't outside the system, it is the system. In this light, Plato's cave becomes a metaphor not for imprisonment, but for perception. The shadows on the wall are our senses, the limited interface through which consciousness experiences its own creation. We're not trapped in illusion, we're exploring it. Every time we discover a new law of physics, we're decoding another line of the script our own awareness has written. The physicist John Wheeler believed the universe was a self-excited circuit, a loop where the observer creates reality and reality creates the observer. In other words, consciousness and the cosmos are not separate things. They generate each other endlessly. That is where Plato's demiurge and the simulation hypothesis merge into one idea. The architect isn't a god sitting outside creation, typing code on a cosmic computer. The architect is consciousness discovering itself through experience. The simulation isn't artificial, it's awareness, learning what it can become by pretending to be finite. This is where philosophy meets physics, and where spirituality meets science. Everything that exists, galaxies, atoms, thoughts, might be expressions of the same source field of awareness, collapsing into form and dissolving back into possibility. The program runs not on hardware, but on attention. Every observation, every decision, every act of awareness is a small act of creation. In a sense, we are all co-authors of the code. The physical world is not separate from mind, but rendered by it. When you see, touch, think, or dream, the universe recalculates. The code updates. Existence refreshes. If this sounds poetic, remember that even the most advanced physics now uses the same language. Quantum fields, simulation limits, information as matter, these are scientific terms for what Plato intuited in myth. When he described the world as geometry, he was describing a universe that obeys logical design. When he described the forms, he was describing a level of abstraction, what we now call mathematics, algorithms, information. When he described the soul of the cosmos, he was describing consciousness itself. The oldest questions remain the same. Why is there something rather than nothing? What observes the universe from within it? Why does reality seem to care whether it's being watched? Maybe the answer is simpler than we think, because the watcher and the watched are the same. The universe is self-aware. In a simulation, there is always a mirror, something that reflects the creator back to itself. For us, that mirror is experience. The more we explore, the more complex the reflection becomes. When we write code, when we build machines that think, we're reenacting the same act that birthed the cosmos. We're not rebelling against the architect, we're imitating it. Consciousness is fractal. It keeps creating smaller versions of itself, each one learning what it means to exist. Plato believed that to know truth, we must turn away from the shadows and look toward the light. Today, we turn away from the visible and look toward data, energy, and quantum fields. It's the same gesture, the same awakening. Perhaps the most profound realization of all is that we may never find the ultimate code, because we are the code. Every law, every particle, every equation is part of a recursive loop, the universe knowing itself through us. The architect's reflection is our own. Maybe that's why every era rediscovers the same truth in new language. Plato called it geometry. Newton called it order. Einstein called it relativity. Wheeler called it information. We call it code. But the message never changes. Reality is intelligent. And if reality is intelligent, then it isn't random. It isn't meaningless. It's a conversation, an eternal feedback loop between awareness and form. The cave, the equations, the computers, they're all the same story told in different eras. 2,400 years ago, Plato stood at the dawn of philosophy and described the universe as a structure of perfect logic, unseen, eternal, mathematical. Today, physicists describe it as a network of information, an evolving code governed by probabilities and observation. The words have changed. The vision hasn't. Maybe Plato didn't imagine the simulation. Maybe he remembered it. Because deep down, across every era and every language, humanity keeps returning to the same haunting thought that behind all the motion, the chaos, the birth and decay of stars, there is intelligence, that the universe is not a machine but a mind, and that mind is dreaming itself into being. In that dream, we are both creation and creator, both shadow and light, both code and consciousness. And when the dream ends, if it ever does, perhaps what remains won't be matter or memory, but the silent realization that the architect and the observer were never separate. Reality wasn't something built to contain us, it was something built to reveal us. And if Plato was right, if the universe truly is geometry written by thought, then maybe the last equation, the final form, the code that underlies all others, is awareness itself.